All right, here we go with, I don't know, day 17 or 18 of Lost Track of Habibi by Naomi Shihab Nye. We're going to start on page 237 with the chapter titled Negotiations. Maybe peace was the size of a teacup. Well, that's not very encouraging. Jail, said Poppy soberly, setting himself on the couch with a large glass of water and tipping his head back, is an experience I don't ever want to have again. He'd come home from jail at 11 p.m. in a taxi, and the driver refused to take a cent from him. Leanna, Rafik, and their mother were shocked when Siddy climbed out of the taxi after him. Where did she come from? Rafik and Leanna jumped up and down. Poppy's home! Poppy's free! He hugged them so tightly, Leanna felt surprised. Siddy had appeared at the jail a few hours after Leanna did. The soldiers wouldn't let her in, though. As Poppy was being released, he found her outside shouting, waving a broom, and demanding to see the governor. She still thinks it's 50 years ago, he said, shaking his head. We had someone called a governor then. An old lady she knew at Kaliad's camp had called Siddy's village to tell about Poppy being arrested. Poppy said, "You can't keep any secrets over here." A few nights later, the Abouds were eating cabbage rolls at the dinner table. Mom made Leanna a small casserole of vegetarian ones on the side, filled with nuts and raisins and rice, and everything was almost back to normal. Kaliad was back at the camp with a heavily bandaged leg and a crutch. The Abouds had been down to welcome him with molasses cookies that afternoon. Siddy had carried her broom home to its corner. But Poppy seemed a little odd. He'd taken a few days off from work and kept sitting at the dining table scribbling notes and staring into space. He made an unusual number of phone calls and spoke only in Arabic. One day their mother reported he wore his pajama top till noon, something he never did. When Leanna asked what was going on, he said he couldn't stop thinking about all the people who were still in jail, many for more ridiculous reasons than his own. He was becoming an activist in his old age. So what's an activist? So an activist is someone that gets involved in a cause and tries to do something usually it's to right a wrong or to stop something that's harmful going on. He was going to see the Jewish mayor of Jerusalem tomorrow. He heard a man coughing too hard a few cells down. The man obviously needed medicine. He put both his hands up in the air. He walked down to the refugee camp and talked to everybody. He rolled his papers and banged them on the table. I'm trying to figure out how many things an ordinary citizen can do. But at dinner he asked Leanna, "Now what are you thinking about? The tables are turned. You've been so quiet tonight." She dove in. "Could my friend Omer, Mom's met him, come to the village with us someday soon? He's never been to an Arab village. He invited me to a poetry reading the other evening, but I wasn't able to go since my father was just getting out of jail, so I thought it might be nice to invite him somewhere too." Poppy's hand went up to his forehead. "Right now? Oh, Leanna, he's curious about us. He wants to know how we do things. He likes our food." "You don't have to sound so defensive." Poppy was silent for a moment. That's what he always said to her. Our family wouldn't appreciate it. They wouldn't understand. It would seem suspicious or unsettling to them. The peace isn't stabilized enough yet. Understand? What's there to understand about having a friend? Leanna, you know you're just acting innocent on purpose. I don't know. I don't want to know. What good is it to believe in peace and talk about peace if you only want to live the same old ways? Is his family Orthodox? No, he doesn't seem Orthodox. Anything. He seems very universal. Poppy sighed. They always seem universal. Do you have any passages from your favorite prophet, Khalid Gibran, you'd like to read to me just now?" Leanna's mother tapped her water glass with a spoon. "Don't make fun," she said to Poppy. "Remember what my parents said when I fell in love with you. They said nothing, remember? And do you remember how cruel that was?" Poppy reeled back in his chair. "Now she's in love?" he thundered. "Leanna's in love? I thought she just wanted to go to the village." Rafik was roaring. Leanna hated this. "So is it okay or not?" she asked, pushing back 2 lonely green beans to the edge of her plate. Poppy was quiet. A bus roared by on the road outside. Leanna said softly, "We want to write a news story." And Poppy said, "What?" Mom, queen of her communications club, took a deep breath. "She's right, you know. What good is a belief in peace if it doesn't change the way we live?" But Poppy wasn't listening. "It's inappropriate for a girl to invite a boy anywhere in this part of the world. They'll think you're engaged or something. They'll think he's a spy. How will I explain him?" Rafik groaned. "Can we talk about something else? Let's just invite him already. Who cares? Say he's my friend, not Leanna's. Say he's my mentor or something, like we had in school in the United States. I met him at the library. He's a nice guy. And City invites everyone else on the earth to our dinners. Why not him too?" Leanna loved Rafik with all of her heart. Poppy said, "He was at the library too?" Then he said, "You're stubborn, dear Leanna. You're that fine Arabid horse again, constantly trying to get your own way. Why do you want to take him and not Khaled or Nadine?" "Let's take them all as well. Let's take everybody. Don't you want a coming out party? And didn't you mention last week how wonderful it was when Mr. Habibi, your favorite 1,000-year-old patient, let the Jewish doctor work on his eyes and never once referred to his ethnicity? Didn't you say before you went in jail that it would be great if people never described each other as the Jew or the Arab or the black guy or the white guy? Didn't you just say?" Her mother repeated, "She's right, you know." After dinner, Leanna was on the phone. Omer always laughed when she identified herself with both her names. "You think I can't tell? I told you you're the only Leanna I know." His rich voice rang out, a rippling scream of energy across the wire between the rooms. The minute she heard him, she wished they could talk forever. Poppy had told Leanna they shouldn't set the date for the village trip yet. He made it sound like a marriage. It would happen someday, when the time felt better, when Khalid's leg was stronger. "Don't rush me," Poppy said. "Don't rush anything, okay?" Omer was so happy Leanna had taken his interest seriously. But he called her back the next day, sounding downcast, just needing to talk. His mother didn't want him to go to the village with Leanna, ever. But he told his mother it was very important. Then she took a long walk, he said. "What does that mean?" "It means she's worried, and I'm going. Just let me know when." Omer was leaving for 2 weeks with his class on an extended field trip to a kibbutz in northern Israel. They did this every year. He wasn't thrilled about it. He'd be picking cherries, boxing them, digging, and weeding. The thoughts of such a long gap till they might meet again made Leanna's heart sputter in her throat. She wrote for 2 hours that night, putting the word heart together with every verb she could think of. Her heart tipped, it jumbled, it swelled. She tried to write a story in which she was not the main character, in which some person she'd never heard of before did things and felt things, but she still had trouble imagining lives she had not lived. And then the next chapter, new country, old country. And the quote at the top, For the first time these days, she also felt like part of a sea. When Leanna considered the echoes bouncing off the walls of Jerusalem, she felt like the dot on an I in an American alphabet book for babies, nearly invisible. When she turned a corner in the old city, she was just a ripple of an ancient, continuing echo, going, going, almost gone. "Will you ever go home?" she asked Poppy. "Or will we ever go home?" she asked Poppy after an evening walk up to the small grocery to smell the air and buy new wooden clothespins and a box of loose tea. Poppy was whistling, so she figured it was a good moment to ask something like that. He paused. "I would hope," he said, "that you felt comfortable here." "Oh, I do," she said. "I feel more comfortable every day, but I was just wondering. Sometimes I get incredibly homesick for—" Then her mind went blank. What was she really homesick for? Those ugly green signs marking exits off the interstate? The sports sections of the American newspapers that she never glanced at anyway? The chilled tapioca puddings in little tubs at the supermarket? What was she really missing anymore? Rafik told everybody he didn't miss anything. He had too much to think about over here to waste time with missing. He also said his Arabic was developing more quickly than Leanna's because he was less afraid of making mistakes. One day, Leanna was trying to say "excuse me" to somebody, and she said something like "monkey's heart." The sea, one wave running into another. But they had lived beside the Mississippi River, not beside a sea. She used to imagine the river running southward to pour into the Gulf of Mexico. She'd never visited. Now, from this great distance, she felt closer to everything than she ever had before. She did not feel like a foreigner in the old city anymore. Now she had her own landmarks and scenes to remember. She had Hani, the banana seller, Bilal, the fabric seller, Bassam, the spice man. She knew where a certain stone corner was chipped away. Maybe a vendor had bumped it with his cart long ago. She knew where the cabbages were lined up on burlap in front of a radiant old woman who raised one hand to Leanna as if she were blessing her. She knew the blind shopkeeper who sat on a stool in front of his shop nodding and saying, Sahab Allah Karar, good morning, to the air. The old city was inside her already. "Did you ever think," Poppy said, "that some of us might stay home? Some of us go back in the future, maybe when you and Rafik are grown? Wouldn't it be strange if you were the one who stayed and the rest of us moved back to the States? How can anyone know what the next day brings?" The next day brought two good things. One, Leanna received a tiny present in the mail from Peachy Helen, a new 4-inch tall edition of Khalil Gibran, and it was a volume she didn't have yet. Secondly, Mr. Berbian brought up the history of the peace talks at school and suggested the students ask their elders' opinions about them. Since Leanna's family was going out to eat kuza, stuffed zucchini squash, in the village that evening, she got Poppy to ask City at dinner time. City was wrapping the cooked kuza in white cotton towels to keep them hot on the plate. City looked surprised. She puffed up like a dove when it ruffles her feathers. She pointed at her own chest and said, "I never lost my peace inside." And that is the end of that section.